Well, what are the drivers for you to maybe to want to actually put the effort to make that content outside, available outside the web page? I'll start with this quote, which is by a guy you've probably heard of. I can't read it. Data is a precious thing and will last longer than systems themselves. Well, I take from this quote that even though the guy invented the web technology, he recognises that content is more important than technology, and technology will change over time. Technology will and has moved on really quickly, so we need to be able to access that content, as technology evolves. I'm sure you've all heard of IoT. If you haven't, it's the notion that it's the connectivity of devices and services and systems over the internet, and it's forecasted to have a bigger impact on our lives than, say, the invention of the mobile phone. And you're seeing it already. Everything in your house, your TVs, my car I've just bought. It's got a very connected instrument on the front. And so that means that data and content needs to be really accessible for this ever-growing list of devices. Also, there's this foundation of open data, and much like open source, open data is the notion that data should be freely available to use and consume. And even, some of you might be aware, the government has made transparency and open data a real key driver to drive improvements in public services and increase innovation and growth. So obviously this requires, yet again, content to be available in multiple formats for services. Developers are demanding. I'm a developer at heart, so I want to use the latest skills. I've got, you might have teams that have developers that .NET isn't your primary skill. Their primary skill, and they may be more comfortable in something like Ruby. So we want to be able to cater for that. New technologies are always emerging, obviously with greater capabilities, and so going forward, we want to be able to embrace those technologies quickly. More systems are integrating all the time. There is the rise of the serverless architecture, which is basically architectures that are composed from multiple third-party elements, and obviously that means that they all need to integrate as well. So the big question is, how is Contensis going to help you with these problems? I think it's good to look back at Contensis prior to version 9, and from the sounds of it, when I saw you in the main hall, most of you are still on version 8.3 maybe. So this is very high level of what happens at the moment. Obviously you edit your content in Contensis. It pushes out the content as ASPX files and SQL Server, and pushes data into SQL Server, and that makes your website. And then in turn, when the browser requests a page, it compiles the page, it sends you the HTML, and it renders it in a browser. Of course, we can target mobile devices like that. Obviously you can code your HTML and CSS to scale to a different viewport, but effectively it's always in a browser. So that has some restrictions, of course. It's platform specific, so we are stipulating using Contensis in version 8.3 that you use .NET. You use Microsoft, so obviously you use .NET as well. We're also saying that you should use C# and VB. Now, like I said before, that might not be your language of choice. One of the things is not necessarily about content being accessible at the web page, but there is a downside to this. We are publishing out pages of ASPX, and then our current model in 8.3, it means that there's a publishing delay as well. So the end result effectively is that content is embedded in an HTML file, so it's not accessible. It's not accessible outside. You could pass that HTML file and try and pull data out. There is some of the data that's in the SQL Server as well. But that's not an accessible thing, and obviously that brings alongside it some security concerns. You wouldn't want to expose your SQL Server publicly and actually start accessing that. Fast forward now to Contensis version 9. We have a new set of API services. Now, all the communication is done over HTTP. The delivery API was released in version 9, and we now have, there will be a management API that will be publicly available shortly this year. So effectively what happens here is Contensis uses the management API and pushes the content into there, and then you use the delivery API to pull the content out. Contensis obviously continues to be the editor, but it's using an API. So some great benefits to this as well. We're using an open protocol, obviously HTTP. It's expected that you can use that on any platform. We're using standard ports. We're not doing it opening up any ports and creating security issues. We're using security OAuth 2 as well, a number of different security flows. So security is really key. Another benefit as well, because the content isn't tied to an actual published web page, we can make that content live instantly. So we aren't actually pushing out files. You're just consuming data that becomes live. And of course, now you've got implementation freedom. You don't need to worry. You could, although we obviously still use a .NET and Microsoft-based publishing platform. You could implement this on any platform because anything can talk TCP. You can use any language or any framework. So if you really want to use Ruby on Rails, now you can actually consume our content and render it out in a new language. And the other side benefit is this: if we ever wanted to change our technology as well, now we've introduced a very strong contract. So our services now are a contract that we won't change. So we might version it, but you can be guaranteed that if we change Contensis completely, we're going to continue using it, and this contract will still be in place. So, just to emphasise the point, we are saying that you can now develop your website in any platform should you choose. You can now use any language should you choose. You might have favourites. So what we're trying to say here is that you can get content anywhere. So this is the model that's in version 9. So obviously Contensis published into our APIs, and our ASP.NET web forms pages with Razor views are consuming them. But now you can develop on a smartwatch if you wanted to and deliver directly from our APIs, or TV if you should see a need for that. Obviously, an obvious candidate is mobile phone and tablet applications, and the desktop applications that we haven't been able to support in the past. And of course, don't forget the fridge as well. Hopefully we can deliver content to that as well, should you find the need. So what's the impact on this for you guys? And obviously you will have your own ideas here, but we can kind of visualize a few. Maybe a university and you want to create your own app for the App Store, so you can now create a native app that uses our, and actually the content is delivered from our services but is rendered in a native app. Or you may be a product-based company who wants to expose their product catalogue either internally to internal systems or externally to other vendors. So you want to be able to share that detail not in a web page. Or maybe you're a council and you want to have an open data gateway. You can use our services and create your own gateway, mold the data how you want, and expose that publicly over XML, JSON, or even CSV. Or maybe you want to bring the content into an email marketing campaign system and actually render out emails from using our services as well. So you probably heard about this. obviously we have these RESTful services which are HTTP based, and they are our primary APIs. That's our primary API technology. But we have provided a number of wrappers as well for these to make the consumption of these APIs a lot nicer to use. .NET is still our primary language at the moment, so we will be providing we provided obviously the .NET delivery API wrapper. When the management API is publicly released, there'll be a management API wrapper as well. We also have a JavaScript wrapper, which we released in 9 as well. And the question mark at the bottom is obviously you can create your own wrappers, or if you don't like our wrappers, the way they function, you can obviously create your own. But what it does is it allows, hopefully, it'll encourage new wrappers to be created, and those wrappers we're going to hopefully push as open source projects, so you'll be able to see the code and contribute to them. And hopefully, if people write wrappers in other languages that you're interested in, then they will be shared. So I'd like to hand you over to Dan now, who's going to show our little demo, which is probably the more interesting bit. Thank you very much.
So this is the React Native website. It gives you all the information that you need. Shows you how you can use it to create mobile apps. It's also got, in the documentation, there's also a getting started guide, which if we look here, Android on Windows, it tells you all the prerequisites that you need to install. So there's Node, Python, the JDK, how to install React Native, the client, the CLI tool itself, and everything. And that does work. I've followed it myself, and it does all work. If you just run through that, it should all be fine. The first thing I'm going to do is install the React Native client. So that would be npm install -g, so install it globally, React Native CLI. Now running that will install React Native. I'm not going to do that now because it takes a few minutes. So once the CLI is installed globally, we can create a project. We do that by doing React Native init and then the name of our project. We should call it Rocket Demo. So if we run that, this will set up everything on my machine. It will create projects, create build scripts, and download all the packages that I will need to install to run the app. Now I'm not going to do that again because it takes time. So once you have all that, there should be now a folder called Rocket Demo, which there is, and there should be an empty project created. If we just look, there is a project that has been created for us to do all that. Now this is an ES6 project, which ES6 is the next version of JavaScript, or ES 2015 or whatever, ES Next, whatever they're calling it now. So this has a lot more things over browser-based JavaScript. It has classes, which it has a class structure with inheritance. As you can see, it has a module system, so I can import things. There's lots of other features. Async await for handling async requests is another one. But there's a lot of features to use. So the next thing I'm going to install is the Contensis delivery API. So it's npm install save Contensis hyphen API hyphen delivery hyphen JS. Now that's installed. the JavaScript delivery API using npm into our project. So then we can run our app. So that launches the packager which deploys the files to our emulator. And we've got this which is building all the files and the packages. So bring the emulator up so we can see it. And there we have it. We have a little application which at the moment isn't doing much, obviously. It's just showing us that we can use React Native. So if we go back to the code, I'm going to import the delivery API and use it. So this is API-delivery-js. And I'm going to import the client, which is the thing we use to connect to connect to the REST services. So once we do that, now we have a client. We've imported the client, but we just need to use it. So the best place to do this would be in the component did mount function. So this is the place where we would use it and set our internal state. So let's create a client. Create a new client, and then we use the method client.create. Now this is asking us this is telling us this needs a configuration object, and if we look, we can actually go to definition on this and see that the client has a create method and it expects an optional configuration object which has a root URL access token for security in the project. Now, as we're not, you wouldn't need this within a Contensis website, but as we're not, we would need it. So I do have the configuration object I need in a separate file, so I'm just going to put that in, and I'll just put it in below here. So yeah, as we can see, just connecting to a root URL with an access token and project ID, page size as well. So let's create a client with that configuration. Now I get full IntelliSense on this, so I can do client entries, and the method we're going to use is list. So this is going to give us a list of entries based on a particular content type. So again, we can go to definition on this and it'll tell us, so this expects either an ID, or which is a string, which is the name of the content type, or we can actually specify a full list of options. So there with the content type ID, language, paging options, and whatever. So we're going to pass in the full list of options at this point. So the content type ID is movie. Now we want the page options. We're just going to show 10 at the moment. So page index is, we want to show the first page. So this is 0 based. So from my example, I'll just pull it out of here. So we've got the page index of 0, we're going to show 10, and then we're going to list it by the release date, but we put a minus in front of it, so it's going to list by the release date descending. So that will make the request. So now we just need to use that. So from this point we will get a list of, we will get a result back, and then within a promise, and then we can use that. So if we go to this method, you can see that this returns a promise, and it's a page list, and a page list is basically a list of items which are on an items property, but then also some paging details, so the index of the page, the size, and the total count, so you can use it for quite nicely for pages. So now we have that, so we're going to populate that in the state of the component. So we do set state, and if I call it movies, and in this case we'll just use the movie list items. Now, because we've used the state, we need to initialize it with, first of all, so we'll use a constructor method on our component. We'll call the base method by using super, and then we will initialize our state, and to do that we just do this dot state equals, and when it's initialized we'll set the movies to be null. So we at this point, what we've done is we've initialized our state. We've then made a request to use the delivery API to make a request for a list of movies. We're only going to get the first 10, ordered by the release date in descending order, like we said, and then when that's come back, we're going to set the state to be the movies that we got back from the API. So that's good, but at this point we're not actually doing anything with that data, so we need to display that. Now I do have this here, so I will just bring this in, put it in here. So at this point we can now see we've added the code to load and display the data that we've got back. So what's going on? Well, first of all, if I look at the bottom line here, what it's actually saying is, if the movies are empty, so in this state, the initial state, when the movies are null, we're just going to show a little a message to say loading movies. And then once the movies are populated within our state, we're going to just loop through those and display a text item with the title of the movie displayed. We also have to add this key for React, so that it knows, so that each thing in a list needs a unique key. So in this case we can just use the ID of the movie. So if I save that, and then I will go back to our emulator and refresh this, and there we have it. It says loading movies, and then we get a list of movies displayed within the app. So I think that shows that it's relatively easy and relatively simple to create an app using our delivery API. Obviously this is very simple, and we have actually created a more rounded version, which I can show you here. If I go to So we have created another version from the scene stuff, which you may have seen earlier on today. Now this has proper listing capabilities, it shows images, it has a search capability as well for you to hide. It has a detail page as well, which you can use to display. When it loads, you should be able to see it. Now the code for this is available on GitHub, so you can pull it down. You can see how it's written and how to use our API in a more advanced way, hopefully. And yeah, you can do with this as you wish. So there we are. We can link through, and then there's a detail page displaying the images for all the films. But this is using the same data as we used just in our small demo, and it is just an advancement on what we did earlier. So yeah, so I hope that's shown you how easy it is to use and how quickly you can create apps using our delivery API, and on multiple platforms, so such as mobile. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Dan. So before I ask the questions, I don't know what the time is. I think you can appreciate that obviously with these services we've exposed a whole new world of opportunities, and I'm sure you've got some ideas how that can apply to your needs. Those slides should be available, so if anybody wants to get hold of them, that slide, then it should be available in the kind of, we're sharing out a Google Drive, and that's in there for definite. So, if anybody's got any questions now, then that's fine. But I don't know what the time is. But if anybody wants to just come up and ask me or Dan a question, just please do at any point today. We'll be going to I will be going to the pub after. So.
I'm moving house today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And obviously, one last thing, don't forget your fridge, it needs some love as well.
A quick question.
Yep.
All the delivery APIs and the management APIs will be available for content types, right?
Yes.
Not
the
structured
delivery
content
API is for...
and not standard templates.
No.
So I think the plan of Zengenti is to slowly abandon the templating system and move all the content as well to the content types.
That's going to be our main focus. We're still going to support templates and structured content for a long time.
Okay.
But even internally, we're developing projects using content types and entries and pushing that.
So
ahead.
for a new website from scratch, would you suggest to create the entire content only on content type?
I think at this point in time it'd be a mixture. So you might want landing pages that would use templates, but that's our focus now, is to be able to create landing pages and single pages using content types and entries.
Thank you.
Looking at your mobile app there, just one question which comes to mind. Is it straightforward for it to pull in data from multiple Contensis projects?
Yes.
yes, it is. It is. The configuration that I kind of brushed over, one of those properties is a project. So you can specify a different project. You'd have to create a different client because it's coming from different areas. But yes, it is. Yeah.
Full screen could show internal data project and external data project without needing to.
Yeah, you might have a shared resources project, for instance, which was difficult before as well. So this really opening that.
And you could do that using the stuff I showed this morning as well. So that isn't just specific to JavaScript; it's also all the APIs. You can do that more, get stuff cross project.
Yeah. Anything else, Andres?
There's just one very quick question. I think in your config, is that an OAuth access token?
Yes.
Accessing it. What is there any internally within the different content types? Can you limit public access to the different content types?
Not yet, but that is definitely coming.
That is
So
the access token. There is a read-only access token
Right.
that currently is available. So But there is nothing to stop you changing that access token, which would then obviously stop the authentication from happening.
But if there were content types that you want to be publicly
That's a
accessible,
feature that's on our roadmap, yeah. Yeah, to be able to limit actual access down to a content type. Yeah. Cool guys, if you've got any more questions, just come and talk to me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.